Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 14 Waiver Wire Show. My name is Dylan Burd, here once again on the Sports Burd podcast, and we have a live show this week. The first time we've done a live show in a few weeks now, and I'm really excited because we're in the fantasy playoffs now in most leagues. Some leagues, the playoffs do start in Week 15 in smaller leagues or leagues where less teams make the playoffs, but in most leagues, we are getting the playoffs this week. Week 14, and we have a very important waiver wire show as a result. Now, we had a little bit of a weird week in Week 13 where we had 2 Monday games, 1 Tuesday game tonight. So pretty sure on most platforms, waivers do not start until tomorrow, and that'll be the result of that. But, we'll talk about waiver wire show today because that's what we normally do. And before we get started here, just wanted to remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you aren't already, and follow me on Twitter at sports_bird if you aren't already. I also do a college football betting picks show on this YouTube channel over on Friday, and then also have an NFL player prop show over on Sal Vetri's YouTube channel on Fridays. So be sure to check that stuff out if you like that as well. Now let's get right to the waiver wire. So we start off here in the AFC East. We start always with my favorite team, the New York Jets. Now, thank you, Greg Williams, for that unbelievable defensive coordinator performance on Sunday. I mean, that I could tell you right now, as a Jet fan, I have not felt so engaged and alive as I did during that end of that Raiders game. I mean, talk about a franchise-altering play with that touchdown to Henry Ruggs. I mean, that's something that could legitimately change the franchise for the next 15 years. So thank you, Greg Williams. Absolutely hilarious that he decided, you know what, I don't care, and just sent out the all-out blitz, but got the loss, and that's what matters. 4 more games left until 0-16 in Trevor Lawrence. But to get off my tangent here, to the New York Jets on the waiver wire, we have running back Frank Gore exited the game with concussion. He was a starting running back, and as a result, we had the running back snap share Ty Johnson getting 61.7% of the snaps, 22 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown rushing, 2 for 13 receiving. And then Josh Adams, the former Notre Dame running back, 31.7% of the snaps, 8 for 74 rushing. So these guys had a pretty dominant day against this Raiders defense. This Raiders defense is a really bad one, so I wouldn't put too much stock into it. I mean, if Gore's out going forward, then Ty Johnson could be a potential add if you're in a really deep league, but I don't expect him to do much against the Seattle run defense, one of the best run defenses in the league next week. In addition, the Jets are probably going to be down a lot in that game, so they're probably going to have to throw, and I don't expect Ty Johnson to produce that much. So I would say if you're in a deep league and you're really desperate, he could be a pickup if, he is the starting running back next week and Gore is out, but I wouldn't put too much stock into Ty Johnson. Now, moving on to the Miami Dolphins. Finally, they got back running back Myles Gaskin, who returned from a knee injury, and also Salvon Ahmed missed Week 13 with a shoulder injury. So I thought it would be interesting to see what the snap share would be if Gaskin and Ahmed were both active. It turns out only Gaskin was active, so we'll see what they do going forward, but I still do expect Gaskin to get the majority. Gaskin gets 70.1% of the snaps this week, 20 for 90 rushing, 251 receiving, so pretty solid game back for him. Lynn Bowden, kind of a wide receiver, hybrid running back wide receiver from Kentucky, rookie, 1 for 11 rushing, 4 for 41 receiving, and then Patrick Laird, 28.4% of the snaps, 3 for 6 rushing, 2 for 16 receiving. Now, my guy, tight end Mike Gesicki, goes 9 catches for 88 yards and a touchdown receiving. So there's a group of tight ends who might be out there on the waiver wire right now that you could look at this week if you're in desperate need of a tight end. Maybe you had Jonnu Smith as your starting tight end, and Jonnu Smith could be out again. So, if you do need to pick up a tight end, Gesicki is in that group of guys you should look at. I love Mike, Penn State guy. Really good. I have a feeling this guy is going to be a top 7 tight end for years to come. It usually takes a while for tight ends to get acclimated in the league, and this is only his 3rd year in the league, so I expect him to be a beast in seasons going forward. But, in the short term, if you do need a tight end, it seems like Tua and Gesicki have been working really, really well, so Gesicki could be an option. Now, moving on to the New England Patriots, we have the Week 13 running back snapshot, pretty much the only thing we've been monitoring for the Patriots. Damian Harris, 48.5% of the snaps, 16 carries for 80 yards rushing, 1 for 15 receiving, and then Sony Michel, who basically got a ton of snaps, because it was a blowout, and that's the only reason why. I mean, he's been kind of banged up all year, and then I'm pretty sure he was healthy, but he just wasn't playing. But 33.3% of the snaps, 10 for 35 rushing, 1 for 23 receiving. And then James White, 28.8% of the snaps, 3 for 1 receiving on 4 targets. So again, just to monitor there, but it's pretty clear that Damian Harris is that number 1 guy in New England now. Now moving on to the Buffalo Bills, who I have to admit, I've been completely wrong about the Bills. I was not high on them going into this season. I thought the Bills were going to lose last night against San Fran, and they completely torched what is a great 49er defense. Now, I know 49ers have had a ton of injuries this year, but that's still a very good defense, pretty good defensive coordinator as well, and Robert Saleh, and they completely destroyed him. So just to go through here, the snap share, Zach Moss had an early fumble, and as a result, Devin Singletary gets most of the snaps, 18 for 61 rushing, 3 for 22 receiving. Zach Moss only 3 for 9 rushing, 1 for 5 receiving. Now, a guy to keep an eye on is Cole Beasley, the wide receiver, who he's had some great blow-up games this year, 9 for 130 and a touchdown receiving on 11 targets in this game. Also wide receiver Gabriel Davis, 3 for 68 and a touchdown on 4 targets. So those 2 wide receivers will be names to keep an eye on, especially with John Brown on IR. Now, Cole Beasley, I'm pretty sure he's just over 50% owned in most leagues, so he's still available in several leagues. Could be a pickup if you need a guy, especially in PPR leagues. Okay, so now we'll move on here. Just switch the screen over to the AFC North. And 1 second here. Some technical issues. There we go. All right. So we got this graphic up here for the AFC North, and we're good to go. All right, so Tuesday Night Football for the Baltimore Ravens. The only thing I'll be monitoring there is really just the running back snap share. I expect J.K. Dobbins to have a huge night tonight against the Dallas Cowboys. Also, the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, there's not much to mention in this division in general, but Cincinnati Bengals running back Joe Mixon missed Week 13 with a foot injury. He's missed a bunch of weeks now in a row on IR, but will return likely in Week 14. So that's good for Joe Mixon owners. He does come back just in time for the playoffs, and they do play the Cowboys next week. So if Mixon is back and is getting the full snap share that he is supposed to, Mixon should go off next week. Now, another thing to monitor is that quarterback Brandon Allen exited the game with a chest injury. That would leave Ryan Finley at quarterback if Allen does miss some time. But these receivers in this game, they didn't play that bad. Tyler Boyd caught a long touchdown. T. Higgins had 5 catches. So look, the wide receivers, they're not going to produce as much as they did with Burrow, but are they completely unplayable? Probably not. I'm not too sure about that. So, just something to keep monitor, whether it's going to be Ryan Finley or Brandon Allen, but shouldn't make too much of a difference there. Now, where the Pittsburgh Steelers get their first loss of the season against the Washington football team last night. Running back James Conner missed Week 13 because of the COVID list. Second straight game missed. And then as a result, the running back snap share, you had Benny Snell grabbing 47.8% of the snaps, 8 for 5 rushing, 2 for 5 receiving. Anthony McFarland, 37.7% of the snaps, 4 for 15 rushing. So not much production out of the running back spot. Steelers haven't been very good at running the ball in general this year, and they played a really, really good Washington football team defense. Couldn't run the ball at all, but I do expect Connor to be back next week, so this is nothing to worry about here. Now, Cleveland Browns, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, snap share, 50% for Chubb, 48.6% for Hunt. Chubb, like normal, does get more carries, 18 for 80 and 1 rushing, 1 for 26 receiving, and then Hunt, 14 for 33 rushing, 3 for 24 receiving. Now, Baker Mayfield had an absolutely huge day, the best game of his career by far, and as a result, some receivers went off. Wide receiver Rashard Higgins, 6 for 95 and a touchdown receiving on 9 targets. Donovan Peoples-Jones, the rookie out of Michigan, 2 for 92 and a touchdown on 3 targets. So, again, don't put too much stock into the Browns' performance last week. This was really the first offensive explosion they've had this year. I don't expect it to happen again, and if it does, then it's something that you'll have to look at. But moving on here to the AFC South, we will see if things start to work here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so moving on to the AFC South, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not much to say here in terms of waiver wire, in terms of injuries. Apparently, Mike Glennon is supposed to start once again next week. He has been playing pretty solid, so I don't blame Jacksonville. even if Minshew's healthy, I don't blame Jacksonville for going with Michael. I'm not really sure what the situation is with Minshew. I haven't been completely keeping up with that. But running back Jonathan Taylor, moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, running back Jonathan Taylor returned for Week 13 from the COVID list, and as a result, got the most snaps on the team, 49.3% of the snaps. Most snaps, I should say, out of all the running backs. 13 for 91 rushing, 3 for 44, and a touchdown receiving. Nyheim Hines, 32.8% of the snaps, 6 for 10 rushing, and a touchdown. 3 for 22 receiving, and Jordan Wilkins, 17.9% of the snaps, 5 for 12 rushing, 2 for 6 receiving. So Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he had 3 carries when we were like deep in the third quarter, and then they actually started running the ball, and Jonathan Taylor went off, got the volume he finally deserved in that late third, early fourth quarter, and as a result, hits his over player prop that I actually had. So good for him. Happy about that. But in terms of just the general waiver wire injury thing for the Indianapolis Colts, not much to monitor there. Now, for the Tennessee Titans, tight end Jonnu Smith, which I mentioned before, missed Week 13 with an injury. Unclear what his situation is going forward. So, again, there's a list of tight ends that, I'll go through today. Mike Gesicki is on that list that could potentially be replacements for Jonnu if they're still available. But also with the Titans, wide receiver Corey Davis. I've been touting this guy for weeks. I'm so happy for Corey Davis. It's year 4 in the league. He hasn't really done anything. He hasn't lived up to his top 10 pick potential. I believe he actually went at the 5th pick. So he has not lived up to that potential. And I mean, he's been unreal this year. 11 for 182 and a touchdown receiving on 12 targets, which led the team 28.6% target share. And he's only owned in 54.4% of leagues somehow. A must add if available. Like I've been saying this for weeks. Corey Davis has been one of the most reliable wide receivers in the NFL this year. And it's absolutely obscene that he's available in this many leagues. Now, moving on to the Houston Texans. Okay, a lot to talk about here. Wide receiver Will Fuller, I mentioned this last week. Suspension, out for the season. Randall Cobb with a toe injury, missed Week 13 as well. Also, running back David Johnson returned from a concussion. So those are all the things going on with injuries/suspensions for the Houston Texans. As a result, sticking with the running back snap share first, David Johnson barely gets more snaps than Duke Johnson. David Johnson, 56.5% of the snaps, 10 for 44 and a touchdown rushing. And Duke Johnson, 54.8% of the snaps, 2 for 8 rushing and 6 for 24 receiving. So I don't have much to add there. I mean, David Johnson's back, so Duke is not going to be valuable at all. Now, running back Keke Coutee, I should say wide receiver Keke Coutee, 8 for 141 receiving on 9 targets, led the team with a 24.3% target share. A definite pickup this week. Only 12.4% owned in fantasy leagues. And Coutee, he is going to be the number 2 guy in Houston until Randall Cobb comes back. Will Fuller's not coming back for the rest of the year. So right now, Keke Coutee is that number 2 guy behind Brandon Cooks. And I mean, Cooks left the game for a brief amount of time because he was getting evaluated for concussion. So Coutee really took advantage of that. I'm happy for this guy. He's been in the doghouse all year, and now he finally plays well. So as long as Deshaun Watson is playing as well as he is, then Keke Coutee is going to be a great pickup because he's going to get a ton of targets each week. He's basically going to take the Brandon Cooks role that Cooks had, that Cooks was, pretty much the whole season where he was the number 2 guy. And now Cooks moves into that number 1 spot and Coutee moves into that number 2 spot. So Keke Coutee, good pickup for this week. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much expected this. I mentioned this last week. So good for him. Good for Keke Coutee. Definitely a decent pickup this week. So now moving on here to the AFC West. Got the fast screen share this time. Finally working. So now we have running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I feel bad for all fantasy owners that had to deal with this. Listed as active and didn't end up playing with an illness. I believe he had flu-like symptoms, so didn't end up playing. Sat on the bench, and as a result, Le'Veon Bell gets 52.4% of the snaps, 11 for 40 rushing, 2 for 15 receiving, and Darrell Williams, 47.6% of the snaps, 6 for 38 rushing, 1 for 5 receiving. Not much else to say about the Chiefs, but I'm sure Edwards-Helaire will be back if it was just truly an illness that he was dealing with. And Los Angeles Chargers, nothing to report here in terms of waiver wire, in terms of injuries. And the Las Vegas Raiders, we had running back Josh Jacobs, missed Week 13 with an ankle injury. And I was huge on the Devontae Booker train. Now, it turns out he did nothing against the Jets, 43.2% of the snaps, so barely gets more snaps than Jalen Richard. 16 for 50 rushing, 1 for 1 receiving. And then Richard, 39.2% of the snaps, 4 for 11 rushing, 1 for 6 receiving. Theo Riddick, 17.6% of the snaps, 3 for 6 rushing, 1 for 3 receiving. Now, not much to say going forward. If Josh Jacobs misses another week, then Devontae Booker could be a potential plug and play. The Jets run defense, believe it or not, for an 0-16 team, the Jets have a very, very good run defense. Guys do not produce on the ground against the Jets, so I would be willing to give Booker another chance if he does start next week, but something to monitor as the week goes on. Now, for the Denver Broncos, quarterback Drew Lock returned from the COVID list for, he missed that game last week with the whole saga with the Broncos QBs all being out, but he returns 15 for 28 passing, 151 yards and 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Now the running back snap share, we had Melvin Gordon gets 57.4% of the snaps, 15 for 131 rushing, 1 for 11 receiving. Now Phillip Lindsay, 39.3% of the snaps, 14 for 26 rushing. So, we've been monitoring this running back snap share. Gordon is the guy, but Lindsay has been getting a ton of snaps as well. Denver is pretty much a disaster on offense. As long as Drew Lock is a quarterback, that's probably going to remain the same, unfortunately, for them. So don't put too much stock into anything going on there. I'm not interested in the Broncos at all. I know Tim Patrick did have 2 touchdowns, but to me, that's not anything worth mentioning because that's not a guy you could rely on going forward. But moving on to the NFC finally here, the NFC East, I should say, we have the Dallas Cowboys who play on Tuesday night tonight, so nothing to say about them right now. Now, the New York Giants, congratulations to the New York Giants who got a huge win in Seattle. Unfortunately for them, the Washington football team also won in Pittsburgh. So, that division is going to be a dogfight between those two teams the rest of the year. I know they're both 5-7, but both are playing really, really good football and both have great defenses. So don't sleep on these two teams going forward because I would not be completely surprised if one of them gets into the playoffs, plays a home game, and somehow manages to squeeze one out in the playoffs just because their defense is so good. But moving on to injury and waiver wire stuff here, New York Giants quarterback Daniel Jones missed week 13 with a hamstring injury. And as a result, quarterback Colt McCoy comes in 13 for 22, passing 105 yards and a touchdown and 1 interception. And that's all it took to get the win. He didn't have to throw that much, even though Seattle does have a bad passing defense. Didn't do much. Not much production from the wide receivers and Evan Ingram as a result. But running back Wayne Gallman, he did continue his tear, 16 for 135 rushing. Now, that is extremely impressive considering Seattle has one of the best run defenses in the league. So Gallman has been playing unbelievable lately. For sure, a fantasy starter as long as he remains the starting running back, which he will for the rest of the year. And Washington football team, a brutal, brutal loss last night. Running back Antonio Gibson exited the game with a toe injury. So that happened on his second carry of the game. And because of that, I'll be missing the playoffs in a league. So not good there. If Antonio Gibson did play and have a decent day, I would have had a shot to get into the playoffs. He gets hurt. I unfortunately lose as a result. So that's just brutal. Antonio Gibson has been unbelievable this year for so many people who roster him. And just the fact that, with injury that could linger, it's possible that he could miss some time going forward. He could be out for the fantasy football playoffs, and that would be an absolute bummer. But if you do own Antonio Gibson, you must try and either trade for J.D. McKissic. I guess there's a trade deadline in some or most leagues, but if you don't, if he's still available, then try and pick him up. But J.D. McKissic gets 73.6% of the snaps here, 5 for 8 rushing, 10 for 70 receiving on 10 targets, 22.7% target share. Peyton Barber, 33.3% of the snaps, 14 for 23 and a touchdown rushing. And look, both running backs are potential adds as long as Gibson is out. Now, we don't know for sure if Gibson's going to be out, but if it is a turf toe injury, I wouldn't be surprised if they do hold him out a week, especially, being in this playoff push. And the fact that he's just such a young player, he is a rookie. You don't want anything to get significantly worse just from him playing. But both of these guys are potential adds. Barber is going to get more carries than McKissic next week, and I don't think that's and he might get a goal line touchdown. I don't think that's a debate. But McKissic is going to get a ton of catches. And if you're in a PPR league, McKissic could be very, very valuable. Alex Smith, at this stage of his career, he's a check down quarterback. He throws all of his balls short. And as a result, McKissick is going to have a big week next week. He's going to probably catch somewhere between 6 to 10 passes. So that's extremely valuable. So if you could somehow get J.D. McKissick off waivers, he is a must add this week. Also, Barber would not be a bad consolation prize because you could get a few 1-yard touchdowns out of him, even though he won't be huge on a yards per carry basis. But tight end Logan Thomas also had a huge day. He's one of these tight ends on the list that could potentially be a pickup. 9 for 98 receiving and a touchdown on 9 targets, 20.5% of the target share. So Logan Thomas, another great story on that Washington team that's going very underrated this year. He was a quarterback as he came into the league. I believe a quarterback that was drafted in the 4th or 5th round from Virginia Tech, and ends up changing positions from quarterback to tight end and ends up succeeding. So look, Logan Thomas is a pretty solid option going forward. So, him, Gesicki, and there'll be more tight ends that I'm going to mention later that are on that list of potential tight end pickups if you need one. Now moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, quarterback Jalen Hurts replaced quarterback Carson Wentz mid-game. Hurts goes 5 for 12, 109 yards, a touchdown and interception, 5 for 29 rushing. Unknown who will start in week 14. If Jalen Hurts does start, expect this offense to get a little bit of a kickstart. I do think Hurts will play better than the way Carson Wentz has, been playing. It's not that hard to play better than Wentz. I mean, it would be hard to play worse than the way Carson Wentz was playing. So I'm excited if Jalen Hurts does start. I hope he does. Now, tight end Dallas Goedert, doesn't matter that his quarterbacks aren't producing. He's been playing great. 5 for 66 receiving on 7 targets, which led the team 28% target share. He will be a top 8 to 10 tight end for the rest of the season. So again, one of those guys that is on that list of tight ends that are must adds if they are available on the waiver wire and if you need a tight end. But moving on here to the NFC North, we have the Green Bay Packers, who, what am I going to talk about again? Another tight end Robert Tonyan, 4 for 39 and a touchdown receiving on 5 targets, touchdowns in 3 consecutive games. So Tonyan, definitely a guy that you could add and start. I did it in one of my leagues this week, and it paid off. I mean, I had Jonnu Smith. He got hurt. And Jonnu Smith also hasn't been getting a ton of targets lately. So I was like, all right, need to make a change. Picked up Tonyan, plugged him in, and gets a touchdown for me. So this guy's been on fire, and he is on that list of potential tight end pickups. Chicago Bears, nothing to report here in terms of the waiver wire. In terms of injuries, this is not a huge division for waiver wires or injuries, but wide receiver Adam Thielen for the Minnesota Vikings returned from the COVID list, 8 for 75 and a touchdown receiving on 11 targets. If you are a wide receiver, playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars is the best thing you could ask for right now. I mean, that team cannot defend wide receivers to save their lives. Every single wide receiver has destroyed them all year, and Thielen and Jefferson took advantage of that this week. Now, moving on to the Detroit Lions, we have wide receiver Kenny Golladay and running back DeAndre Swift, who, again, missed the game with injuries, illnesses. So again, Swift was out with an illness. I think Swift will be back for week 14. Golladay, we'll have to see. Golladay really has been out a while now, but week 13 running back snap share as a result, filling in for DeAndre Swift. We had Adrian Peterson grabbing 47.0% of the snaps, 16 carries for 57 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing. Kerryon Johnson, 43.9% of the snaps, 3 for 3 rushing. Peterson, I mean, I don't really know what to say about Peterson. I mean, he always seems to grab those couple of touchdowns or at least one goal line touchdown if Swift is out. So again, probably not an option, but if you're that desperate, I guess you could go there if Swift is out again. Wide receiver Marvin Jones, 8 for 116 and a touchdown receiving on 12 targets, 29.2% of the target share. Marvin Jones has been phenomenal without Kenny Golladay, so shout out to him, but I believe he's probably owned in most leagues. If he's not, obvious must pick up. But moving on to the NFC South, our second to last division that we have to go over, and the Tampa Bay Bucks on a bye, Carolina Panthers on a bye. So the only 2 teams we have to talk about, the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints, who actually played each other this week. And the Atlanta Falcons, we had wide receiver Julio Jones, who returned from his hamstring injury to 6 catches, 494 yards on 10 targets. Now, the running back snap share was really bizarre. Todd Gurley did return from injury as well, a knee injury. He has knee problems, so they held him out last week, and he, as a result, was not the highest snap share out of the running backs. Ito Smith grabs 36.5% of the snaps, 8 for 36 rushing, 1 for -2 receiving. Todd Gurley, only 30.2% of the snaps, 8 for 16 rushing, 1 for 4 receiving. And Brian Hill, 17.5% of the snaps, 5 for 18 rushing. So, I mean, if you're a Todd Gurley owner, not sure what to say. This has been a problem with Gurley for a couple of years now. He can't really last the entire season. The season takes a toll on his knee. So not much else to say with Atlanta, except the fact that I expect this to be the case going forward with the running backs, is that they're all probably going to split 3 ways, and there's just nothing you can do about that. But moving on to the New Orleans Saints, only thing to say is that Drew Brees was once again out with the fractured ribs. Now, that's something to keep an eye on because it's possible that he could return very soon, but quarterback Taysom Hill had a great game, 27 for 37 passing, 2 for 232 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 14 carries for 83 yards rushing. So Hill, 2 of his 3 games are against the Falcons, and he's lucky about that because once he played a good defense in Denver, he was not playing well at all. Plays the Falcons twice and destroys them. So good for Taysom Hill. And moving on here to the last division that we have to talk about is the NFC West. We have the Seattle Seahawks. Nothing to report here in terms of the waiver wire, in terms of injuries. Pretty bad home loss to the Giants, but not much to say in terms of waiver wire. Arizona Cardinals, the only thing we've been talking about is the running back snap share all year. Chase Edmonds, 56.5% of the snaps, 6 for 28 rushing, 2 for 15 receiving. Kenyon Drake, 46.8% of the snaps, 10 for 49 and a touchdown rushing, 2 for 9 receiving. Now, moving on to the San Francisco 49ers. I've had a packed board with the 49ers all year, and that continues this week as the running back snap share. We have Jeff Wilson grabbing 45.9% of the snaps, which is the most on the team, 7 for 47 rushing, 2 for 12 receiving. Raheem Mostert grabbing only 44.3% of the snaps. That absolutely killed my player prop, by the way. I had Raheem Mostert over rushing yards. Only gets 9 carries, which is brutal, for 42 yards, 1 for 1 receiving. Tevin Coleman, 6.6% of the snaps, 2 for -11 rushing. So rough return for Coleman there. Now the wide receivers, both available in a decent amount of leagues, actually. Like I think they're both available in like over 30% of leagues. And maybe Debo was last week, but maybe a bunch of people added Debo after last week. Maybe Debo's only like 20% available now, where Ayuk is like 35% available, if not more. Debo Samuel goes 6 for 73 receiving on 9 targets, which was tied for a team lead, 23.1% of the target share. And Brandon Ayuk, 5 for 95 and a touchdown receiving on 9 targets, also tied for the team lead, 23.1% of the target share. Yeah, as I said here, Ayuk only 63.6% owned, so he's over 35% available across leagues. Obviously, Ayuk is a must pick up if he's still available. He's on that list of guys like Corey Davis who are must adds if available. Same with Debo Samuel, but Debo is more owned than Ayuk. And the last team that we're going to talk about, the Los Angeles Rams, and it might be the most important thing that we're going to say all day, Cam Akers. This guy is going to win leagues this year. I don't think that's a doubt. I'm extremely excited that I added Cam Akers in one of my 12-man leagues a couple of weeks ago, ahead of the curve, stashed him on the bench, actually in my league with Sal's where I added him. And I believe that now that I have Gibson out, Cam Akers could be slotted right into that spot. Cam Akers gets 64.6% of the snaps, 21 for 72 and 1 touchdown rushing, 1 for 22 receiving. Darrell Henderson, 20.3% of the snaps, 3 for 49 and a touchdown rushing, 2 for 25 receiving. Malcolm Brown, 15.2% of the snaps, 3 for -3 rushing, 1 for 30 receiving. Akers, my number one add this week, a must add this week, only 35.8% owned across leagues. And Akers, it looks like he is the starting running back going forward. So even if Darrell Henderson ends up getting a little bit more of the snaps, I still expect Akers with performance these last few days. I expect Akers to be going strong and be the guy who's getting the most carries on the team. He does have a touchdown in the last 3 games as well. So Akers is the guy this week. I mean, like I put him in the thumbnail for a reason. Akers is the guy this week. Akers will win leagues. I'm going to stress it again and again. Akers will win leagues. Be sure to pick up Cam Akers this week. So before we wrap up, just wanted to open it up. If anybody watching has questions, be sure to ask and I will answer them. I will answer a question from James_Corvino right now. Do you have interest in Zeke rushing yards under tonight, expecting a Ravens blowout? So what I would say to that is I haven't picked my props yet for tonight. I'm not sure if I'm going to roll with any props, honestly, but I think that Zeke is going to have a poor night against the Ravens for sure. I mean, I expect the Ravens to have a bounce back game from what they have been lately. Lamar, this is a get right game for the Ravens offense playing against this Dallas Cowboys defense. And if it is a blowout, then yes, Zeke will hit his under rushing yards. So I definitely do not mind that at all. I have not been doing well on unders lately, but I do expect Zeke to have a poor night against the Baltimore Ravens defense, especially if it is a blowout. Now, while I let any other potential questions flow in, I do want to remind you to be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video. It really helps me out. Also, be sure to follow me at sports_Burd on Twitter if you aren't already. So Twitter has been a great tool. I mean, I have gained a lot of followers over the past, couple of weeks from all my videos, and I want to say I'm extremely thankful for that. So thank you to everyone. I'm getting a ton of questions from everyone on, props, on other stuff as well, DMs. Keep those going because that is what makes this so fun. I love, getting tweets from everyone. I love interacting with everybody in the community. So just want to thank everyone for that and say I really do appreciate it. And, look, Twitter is like my number one tool. It's where I add bets. It's where I subtract bets. So I'm going to keep doing that. And I love the interaction on Twitter. So thank you again for all the support there. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Sportsbird podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and leave a rating and review. That would really help me out a lot as well. And just a reminder, I will have my college football betting pick show on this YouTube channel over on Friday. And I will also have my NFL player prop show over on Salvetri's YouTube channel on Friday as well. So be sure to check that stuff out if you're interested. So that's all we got today. That's a wrap for the Week 14 Waiver Wire show. Good luck, everybody, in the fantasy football playoffs, and good luck with your waiver wire bids this week.